In the last episode there was a bug in the code that I didn't notice. It's not a game-breaking error, but it's something that I want to fix, because sometimes the bouncing enemy wouldn't bounce. Instead it would glitch on its own position. To fix this, it's really easy and quick. Let's grab our Orca script, and in the update method, instead of just checking whether we have went over the margin, we also want to check the direction we are going. Alright, and for our actual episode of today, you can see that the wind goes on, and it goes to the right, so the flag also goes to the right. Then the wind goes to left randomly, and the flag adjusts accordingly. And we also have a random force, a random direction, a random duration for the wind, and also a random duration for the wind when it doesn't blow. Perfect! Hi, I'm Ricky. Today we're in the 17th episode of the Endless Runner series, and in this episode we'll take a look on how to implement a wind system to our game. First we'll make and plug our wind effect, and then we'll add a bit of randomization to make it feel more fresh and dynamic, and add also a bit of a visual feedback. And this wind is gonna move our boat on the x-axis outside of our control. This series is based on a video game that I've already made and published called BoatVenture. If you want to know how this finished product will look like, do check it out, link in the description. It's free for all Android devices 9+ on the Play Store. Alright, let's start. So let's get our game manager and let's make a new component called wind. In here we're gonna need a lot of variables, so I'm just gonna write them all right now and explain later. Wind force tells us how strong the wind will actually move our boat. Wind on timer and wind on timer max tells how long the wind blows, and wind off and wind off timer max tells how long it stays off. While is wind unlocked tells whether the script should run or not, and is wind on tells whether the wind is currently blowing or not. Okay, and now in the update method, we check if the wind is unlocked, and if it isn't, we return. And we're gonna set isWind unlocked in another function. Let's not worry about that now. In here we check whether the wind is on or off. And when the wind is blowing, we diminish the wind on timer and check if it reaches 0. And if it has reached 0, then we want the wind to stop. So we set isWind on to false and we reset the wind on timer. And now let's just do exactly the same but with the other values for when the wind is off. Great, so now we have our main logic. Now to actually set the wind, we are going to use our boat movement script. So let's go grab it. The boat movement script is a script that we use to move our player, and we do that using rigidBody.velocity. What we want to do is make a new value, a float value called wind force, and then change your velocity with that wind force. So first let's make that private float called wind force. And then in our rigid body, we just add a new vector 2 to our rigidBody.velocity, where the x is the wind force and the y is 0. And let's also multiply it by time.fixedDeltaTime. Okay, now let's make a new public void function to change the wind force, and I'm gonna call it setWind. Great, now one thing though, I've noticed that we have these 3 lines of code right here that clamp our position within the screen. Because they do such a specific thing, let's refactor this bit of code in a new function. Doesn't really change anything, but it's better to do it because it's a lot more clear this way. Okay, back to the wind script. In here let's make a new function to actually activate the script, that is setting the isWind locked to true. So I'm gonna make a new public void function called activateFog. I said activate fogged, but of course I meant to say wind. And when we unlock the wind, let's also set the isWind on to true and the wind on timer to its maximum value. Finally, let's make a singleton. And let's go in our unlock enemies manager. In here, if you remember, we have a function called increase difficulty, which we call every once in a while. And what this does is it increases a number to 1 each time, and based on that number we unlock an enemy or the fog or another enemy and so on. What we want to do is, on the first time that we call increase difficulty, we want to unlock the fog. I said fog again, but of course I meant wind, sorry. Of course we also actually want to call the setWind function. So in here, when we set the isWind to true, we call our boat movement script, and we call setWind, and as a parameter we use our wind force. While when we set the wind to false, we just call the same exact function, but instead we say 0. And let's also call the setWind function when we activate the wind. And that's it. Now let's see how it actually looks like in Unity. I've also put the yards to be at to increase difficulty to 5, so theoretically we should activate the wind when we reach exactly the 20 yards mark. And as you can see, the boat starts moving on its own and not pressing anything, well, except for that because I went into an orca. But as you can see, I'm still moving on my own, and then after a while the wind stopped. Of course I'm a bad player, so you couldn't actually see it for long, but trust me, it worked. Okay, so now we have a working wind. What I want to do is to randomize a lot of these values, because right now the wind is only gonna blow on the right direction for 3 seconds and then stay for 3 seconds off. And of course we don't want that, because that gets very repetitive very quickly. So to change the direction randomly, that one is very easy and we don't need to make another value. Let's go in here. And before we do anything else, let's refactor this code in a new function called wind timer. In here, when we set the wind force, let's add a 50-50 chance of inverting the direction. As you can see, I've simply multiplied by -1 the force over wind to get it to the negative value. But this way we're also gonna have always the same wind force. Instead, let's add a bit of randomness so that we have a minimum value and a maximum value, and we set our wind force to a range between those two values. So let's make these two new values. And because now we're always gonna change our wind force to these two new values randomly, we don't want to serialize wind force directly. And let's also make the default values like that. And then let's draw our wind force. Okay, and two other things. I want to randomize how long the wind stays on and how long it stays off. So instead of just setting the values to their maximum, we create two new values for minimum and maximum amount of time to wait. Great, now let's actually use them. So in here we say random range, and we pick from wind off timer min and wind off timer max. And in here, one little thing though, when we activate the wind, we are still setting the wind on timer to the maximum value. Instead, let's also randomize the beginning. And we also have to do the same thing for wind force, because now we also randomize that. And let's do the same for the wind off timer. Great, and let's see how it looks in Unity. In here, if you want, you can change the view from normal to debug to see what's going on under the hood. In theory, when we hit the 20 yards mark, these two new bulls should go to true, and the wind force should get a random value, and the wind on timer should also get a random value and starts going down. And you can see that while the wind on timer is going on, we are affected by the wind. And you can see that the direction is also random. Perfect. I'm gonna remove the debugged view because we don't need it right now. And for a final piece of the wind effect, I want to put a bit of a visual feedback. And what I mean by that is an image of a flag that goes in the same direction of our wind when the wind is on. So let's open our canvas, and in our game panel, let's make a new image. I'm gonna hide the shop real quick. I've also called it wind flag image and set it to the top left corner. And I'm also gonna import a sprite that I've used in my game BoatVenture. I've made it so you can download it for free, link in the description, and I'm gonna set it as the source image. Then what we want to do is just disable or enable this game object based on the wind, and then change the scale from 1 to -1 to flip the image. Now put it to 1 and let's go to our wind script. In here, let's make a new function called setFlagUI. And then we check whether the wind is on or off. In here, we want to interact with our flag, so let's make a new image reference. And because we're only going to modify the rect transform and the game object itself, it's better to actually just get the rect transform component instead of the image component. Then in our function, we get the game object of the rect transform, and we call the setActive function based on our isWindOn. Finally, we check whether the direction is going right or left. And we set the local scale of the rect transform to 1 if we're going right, so the image will be normal. And we set the local scale x of the rect transform to -1 if we want to flip the image, so if the wind is going left. Finally, let's call setFlagUI whenever we change the wind. And that also includes when we activate the wind the first time, so right here. Great, and let's see how it actually looks like in Unity. Let's attach the reference, and let's also disable it by default. And right now at the 20 yards, you can see that the wind goes on, and it goes to the right, so the flag also goes to the right. And now again. Then the wind goes to left randomly, and the flag adjusts accordingly, and again. And we also have a random force, a random direction, a random duration for the wind, and also a random duration for the wind when it doesn't blow. Perfect. Alright, so that's it for this video. Hope you learned something new. If you have any doubts about the code or anything else, or if you have any suggestions about the next topic, do tell me in the comments. If you like this content and you want more, please like and subscribe. And in the next episode, we'll make a second page to our store. And the thing is, we'll make the items that are buyable in that second page to be buyable only if the player has achieved something. In our case, we make it so the second page of our store, so the more powerful items, are only buyable if the player has reached 1000 yards. Alright, and I'll see you in the next video.